The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
A station identification so nice, we play it twice. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. If you weren't with us yesterday, I'll say it again. Happy New Year again. And we recapped yesterday what was really a perfect Sunday for the Commanders. They lost, and Arizona beat Philadelphia, which means if New England beats the Jets at home on Sunday in the 1 o'clock game, and this isn't really much of an if, but when Washington loses to Dallas, and they are 13-point underdogs going into the game, Washington would get the number 2 pick in the draft. Now, if both New England loses and Washington loses, then it's all tied up in what happens the rest of the day because their strength of schedule is virtually the same. It's just about even, which means that it'll depend on some other games. But if Washington goes into this game knowing that New England won, whoo-hoo, tankathon, baby. Not that they have, even if they try, there's not much chance they're going to beat Dallas. But full steam ahead on getting the number 2 pick of the draft, which would be really ironic if it turns out to be Drake May, because Drake May is the one who replaced Sam Howell at North Carolina. But we'll get to pro football. There's a lot to talk about there. But most of the day we'll spend on the 2 great semifinal games from last night. These college football playoffs, they haven't always been good. It's been rare when you get 2 good games, and we had 2 really good games yesterday. Thank you, Auburn, for blowing that game against Alabama. Thank you for giving up the 4th and 31, because if that hadn't happened, Alabama wouldn't have been in the playoff, and we would have had Florida State getting blown out last night. And would not have been a game whatsoever against Michigan. It would have been just absolute dreck. So thank you to Auburn for losing. And Florida State, shut up, because you were an embarrassment against Georgia. And I don't want to hear, 20 players stopped it out. Well, if you wanted to make your point about being snubbed for the playoff, at least show up against Georgia. And you didn't even show up. You took your ball and you went home. Well, I guess our schedule doesn't matter. I guess the fact we went undefeated doesn't help us. Well, they wanted to pick the 4 best teams, and I think they did. I mean, you could even make a case that Georgia should have been there, and Georgia probably could beat any of those 4 teams from last night. But I understand what you did there, and we had 2 really good games, so that's good. We will get to all that. But I want to throw this in before I forget. We got television tonight. Maryland's playing the top-ranked team in the country, Purdue. They beat them here last February. Zach Edey, player of the year, 7'4". These guys play in college now. They don't play in the pros anymore. But he's coming in with the team that embarrassed itself in the NCAA tournament last year. Remember, they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson, another 16 taken down a 1 as Virginia went down a number of years ago to UMBC, and Fairleigh Dickinson did the same to Purdue. But they're coming in tonight. I'd like to see that game. And I don't watch all of the Caps games, but I occasionally watch some of them before they get to the playoffs. And the Caps are playing tonight at Pittsburgh, big rivalry game. I don't have the ability to watch either one of them. The Maryland game is on Peacock, and if I wanted to watch the Caps game, that's on ESPN Plus and Hulu, which are extra pay services. So as I sit across from young Rex Minturn, who still lives at home, and his parents are about my age, maybe a little bit younger, what's your television situation at home? Do they have all these streaming services?
We have kind of just an assortment of logins. Not all of them are theirs.
So your brothers give you their logins? Okay,
stuff like that.
Yeah. Do you have any of these?
I think I have both of those.
You have those. So if
I have on one TV or another, somewhere in the house.
But Peacock has got to be, what is that, like another $20 a month or something like that?
So they used to give you Peacock if you just had cable. Like NBC would give you it.
Right.
But now, like, there was a game on Peacock last week that I didn't think we'd be able to watch, but I had it, so I don't know.
Because of your logins.
Yeah, but I think we just get it through the cable, so I don't know.
And we had, not last weekend, but the weekend before, where we had an NFL game on Peacock, and a lot of people. That's the one, and a lot of people were complaining about the freezing, and it wasn't as good as it is on Prime.
It was fine.
Okay, it was all right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I wonder where I'm going to go with this because I have cable and I pay a lot of money for things that I do like to watch. I do like the shows that are on HBO and sometimes on Showtime, but it looks like I'm just shut out of a lot of things I want because they've all been sold off to other networks and other streaming services, which I don't want to pay any more for. I mean, how much do you need to pay for television? It's crazy. So, well, all right. I have to listen to Johnny Holiday tonight on the radio. Let's unpack from last night and start with, I think, the most fascinating story, and that's the University of Michigan. And you remember when you were on the playground and there'd be a call or something like playing kickball or something like that, whether somebody was out or safe, and the cry would be, "Cheaters never prosper." Well, look at Michigan. You got Jim Harbaugh, who missed half the season for multiple suspensions. The first one for what he did during COVID, which now seems ridiculous, but bought somebody a hamburger when he wasn't supposed to do that. So he missed the first 3 games of the year. And then he missed the last 3 games of the year because he had a guy who was stealing signs. And it didn't matter. They kept winning. They won those games. They won the Big Ten championship, and they get into the playoffs as the number 1 seed. And you figure, oh, boy, they're going to get their comeuppance because Alabama's been there, done that. And Nick Saban, this time of year, you give him time to prepare, forget it. It's lights out. And, yeah, they lost to Texas early in the season, but that was before they figured out that Jalen Milroe was a really good quarterback, and now they're rolling with him, and they should be able to take care of this rogue program, this coach who cheats. Well, cheating ain't cheating anymore. It's pretty clear. And they took care of business last night in what was a terrific game. Just now it wasn't a picture-perfect type of game. There were a lot of turnovers in it. Alabama didn't really look like Alabama. They reverted back to some of the things that they were doing earlier in the season against Texas. They had 13 punts in this game, 8 fumbles, 2 of them lost, a missed extra point, plenty of special teams blunder, every point, every snap, every mistake magnified. The Alabama snapper, who fortunately for him is a senior because he'd be told to leave if he wasn't, had a couple of bad snaps last night. It was not an aesthetically perfect game, but it was a very exciting game, which came down to the end, and it came down to Jalen Milroe with the ball in his hands and a call that I can't understand. The last play of the game, where this quarterback with all this speed and wide receivers, they don't have the great wide receivers that they've had in the past, but you think of Alabama as having much more speed and quickness than Michigan, and they try basically a tush-push from the 3-yard line, and Milroe got stopped. It was nuts. So, Michigan moves on, and they move on with a great victory here as they win in overtime, 27-20. This is Jim Harbaugh on what he's been through this year, and now he's kind of flipping it to what may be an advantage for his team.
No, it's almost been an unfair advantage. I mean, all the things that the team has gone through. I mean, we don't care anymore. We don't care what people say. We don't care about anything that comes up. We just know we're going to overcome it because it's unanimous support from every single guy on the team.
Why should you care, right? It doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't seem to matter who's coaching the team on the field. I was at the Maryland game. That's about the biggest scare they've had recently. I guess, of course, last night, but going into the playoff, that was a close game. I never really felt like Maryland was going to win that game, but it was close, and Harbaugh wasn't there. He was serving the suspension. Actually, he was hanging out with his brother at his house in Baltimore because the Ravens had played Thursday night, so he didn't have anything to do for the weekend. So he and his brother hung out and watched the game on television. By the way, how about the Harbaughs? Right now, you'd have to make Baltimore the favorite to win the Super Bowl. John could win his second. And Jim, right now, they already are. They're 5.5-point favorites heading into the national championship game against Washington. Brothers winning the national championship and the Super Bowl in the same year. Pretty cool. Also, Guys came back this year. I mean, this is one good thing about the portal that you didn't have in the past, where guys would try to get to the NFL as quickly as they could. And in some cases, you'd have star players only playing 2 years because the redshirt year would count for their 3 years before they'd be eligible to go into the draft. Now you're seeing stars come back. So what you saw from J.J. McCarthy, who was the MVP of the game last night, finished with 221 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. You might not have seen that in the past. And Blake Corum, who may or may not be a really great NFL player, and with the de-emphasis on the running game, maybe he won't, but he came back for a final year. And between the two of them, they were able to push Michigan through. And so, that has been fun to watch. It's fun to watch guys that you're familiar with coming back for another year. More from Harbaugh, and, this wasn't the time to ask it after last night, but it's a question that has to be asked is, what are you doing? Are you going to stay? Because reportedly he's been offered a 10-year deal for like $12.5 million a year as long as he doesn't flirt with the NFL just this year. And I didn't expect him to say anything last night, but it's just interesting to listen to the question and the answer.
Coach, there's a lot of interest in your future. I wonder if you can tell me what the chances are that the championship game might be your last one at Michigan.
Boy, my future consists of a happy flight back to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Can't wait.
Yeah, he's not going to say anything. So we're a week away from this wild speculation. We'll find out a week from today, really, because that'll be the night after the championship game, and everything will be in full swing by then, because Black Monday is coming Monday when everybody gets fired, including Ron Rivera. And then Tuesday, the search kicks into high gear as to who you want to replace those guys. More analysis from last night. Kirk Herbstreit did the Rose Bowl, so he did the Michigan-Alabama game, but hung out and watched the Washington-Texas game, which came down to the final play. Oh, both games, you can't ask for much more than that. 4th down, final play, 1 second left on the clock, and Washington was able to pull out the victory. This is Herbstreit last night with Scott Van Pelt on what he saw in this game.
I've called 4 or 5 Washington games this year. I've watched this team be doubted. I've watched this team deliver. I thought this morning on College Game Day, I wasn't able to pick the Michigan game because I was calling it, but I told everybody I thought it would be a Michigan-Washington national championship. You have no idea how it's going to play out. Sure. But my Washington thought was which quarterback would have the ball last, which quarterback would have a chance to win. I saw like a 38-35 type of game, and it kind of played out that way. Quinn Ewers and Texas and Sark, they deserve a lot of credit for the season they had, and just coming up a little bit short. But to me, it's more about celebrating what Washington was able to accomplish, the year that they've had, doubted and questioned. It wasn't always pretty. But give them credit, man. They got there. They got to the semifinal. They got the win, and now they're headed to Houston for the national title.
Oh, yeah, that was the short version. I got another one here. This is Herbstreit on the Michigan win and what he saw calling the game from the booth.
That game, that's what it's all about. That's what you hope for is a game like that. When you see Michigan and Alabama at the Rose Bowl, you hope it's a good game. You don't know if it's going to be a good game. And then the momentum swings, sure. the way the game went back and forth, as good as you could hope for. Congratulations to both those teams. I mean, Alabama gave everything that they had. Jalen Milrose, it's been a remarkable story where he started this year, got benched, came back, battled, made some big plays. Kind of this game was very symbolic of their season. It looked like Michigan was going to pull away. They came storming back in the second half, and then here came Michigan back. I mean, it was a game of momentum. It was college football, and you had the San Gabriel Mountains and the Rose Bowl setting. It's perfect. It was unbelievable, and congratulations to Michigan for a huge win. And now, they keep saying one more. Yeah. They got one more to go. So we'll see what happens in that big one in Houston next week.
Let's talk about that one. If the Bama-Michigan game was in a phone booth where it was block, tackle, execute, it's a little bit more of a track meet in the Sugar Bowl. And you think about Michael Penix Jr. and that offense going up against that Michigan defense who had to make a play to send them forward, which it did. Is there an advantage one way or another there, Herbie?
I don't know. I think both teams, what's interesting, and it's not by accident, when you're sitting there in August and you're trying to figure out which teams are going to possibly make a run. I think both these teams have that proverbial chip on their shoulder. Washington feels doubted every single week because they're an underdog, and if you really talk to them and you peel it back, don't pretend that that's not a major motivator. You heard of the guys on the podium after the game. Here we are, doubted again. What's new? They just kind of thrive on that. And then you got this Michigan team with Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy, just a veteran group. They got embarrassed by Georgia. They didn't quite get it done against TCU. This team was in autopilot, focused on just winning it all. They beat Ohio State. Everybody wanted to talk about it. The players were like, what's next? They got ready for Iowa. They won that game. What's next? They just won this game. They just seem to have a singular focus on winning a national championship. It's not enough. So how fitting is it that these two teams collide? And let's not forget that Jim Harbaugh, on 4th down and 2, deep in his own territory, late in that game. I don't want to just miss that. That is Jim Harbaugh coaching to win. He had 3 timeouts. Conventional wisdom says punt the football. Alabama had a lot of momentum. Punt the football. Bama's going to run 3 plays. Use your 3 timeouts. Get the ball back. That's what every coach would do. Instead, he goes for it. He gets Blake Corum out in the flat. He gets him one-on-one. The linebacker doesn't go out in the flat. They hit him. Now there's a block in the back, so it had to come back, but they got the first down. That call led them to the game-tying touchdown. And again, to me, very symbolic of their season and their head coach playing to win with aggressive mindset. Chris Fowler said it perfectly. All the chips in the middle of the table with about 3 minutes to go in the game, and it paid off for them. And here we go. Michigan, Washington, for it all, the national championship. It's awesome.
Yep, it should be good next Monday night. Michigan favored by 5 points. We'll talk more about this with Lauren Druhan coming up at 10 o'clock. She and I made our picks last week, and of course, we picked Alabama and Texas to play for the national championship. So it's going to be Washington and Michigan next Monday night, and an earlier start. I mean, my God, 8:45 was the scheduled start last night, but because the Michigan-Alabama game went into overtime, they pushed it up to like 9 o'clock. It was not over until 12:50, close to 1 o'clock in the morning. It's just too late. I'm sorry. It's just too late. It's fine on the West Coast, not good here. Kalen DeBoer, quite a story, the coach at Washington. He talked to Scott Van Pelt last night. We'll hear what he has to say as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up today. Tony on a Tuesday, and we're spending a lot of time on the playoff games last night in college football. Lauren Druhan with more on that coming up at 10 o'clock, and we'll look at our picks, which were wrong on both counts from last week, and look ahead to the national championship game next week. I saw this. This is cute. Nick Saban's wife, he calls her Miss Terry. That's a very Southern thing. You call your wife Miss Terry. And she's been down the road with him a long time. They've been married probably since they were in college, maybe 50 years. And she's been through the highs and the lows, and last night was one of the lows, and she greeted her husband with a hug and a couple of pats on the back after he finished up his news conference. Nobody could hear what she said, but she later was asked about it, and she said to him, do you want to watch the other football game, meaning the Texas-Washington game, since that was now going on? And Nick Saban said, not really. And Terry Saban said, okay, let's watch Netflix. So they've been watching a foreign film. It's Turkish or something, she said, and reading the subtitles would be helpful for him to forget about the game. Not unusual for a coach to lose in a game like that and not want to watch anything else. I remember talking to Gary Williams, 2001, Maryland blew that 22-point lead against Duke in the semifinals, and the next night Duke played Arizona for the national championship, and I asked him if he watched it. He said, no, I had no interest in watching that. Tom Brady, when he would lose in the conference championship game, which didn't happen very often, wouldn't watch the Super Bowl. So no surprise that Nick Saban doesn't want to watch any more football this year. He may watch the national championship game next week and second guess himself about what he could have done to prevent Michigan from getting there. But then somebody asked Terry Saban if her husband would continue to coach. He's 72, and she said, "We're not answering questions like that right now." Okay. And then just some follow-up on what Saban did at the end of that game. It was very curious to see how they called it down at the end. And he seemed to throw the offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees, under the bus. It'll be interesting if Rees comes back. Rees has a background at Notre Dame. He was their quarterback when they got their doors blown off by Alabama. What was that, 10, 11 years ago, something like that. And so he then became a coach at Notre Dame and got the opportunity to coach with Saban. And Saban said, we called 3 plays. One they called a timeout. One we called a timeout. The last one that didn't work, the fact that it didn't work made it a really bad call. You know what I mean? But we called timeout because we had a bad look. We had a good look on the first one. They must have known it. Tommy felt like the best thing we could do was have a quarterback run, which was kind of our 2-point play, one of our 2-point plays for this game. But then there was a low snap from Seth McLaughlin, who's the center, and he had a couple of bad snaps in this game. His career now is over since he's a senior, but that was something that you wouldn't expect from an Alabama team in a game like that. And Saban said to his team in the locker room after the game, this is one of the most amazing seasons in Alabama football history in terms of where this team came from. Remember, they lost to Texas 34-24 the second week of the season. And I remember listening to the news conference from Saban afterwards, and he was talking about how great it was to compete in this game of football. And it sounded to me like a guy who was getting ready to bow out. You know, it sounded like, because he hates to lose. And it sounded like, oh, wasn't it a privilege to lose at home to Texas by 10 points? You know, isn't it great to be a part of this? And I thought, he's not sounding like he's still got the fire. But they turned it around. They had a game against South Florida, which wasn't very good either. They won 21-7 right after that. But then they went back to Jalen Milroe and started to roll and got lucky too. I mean, there's no way that Auburn should have given up that 4th and 31 in that game in the Iron Bowl. No way they should have done that, but they did. Alabama got there, and they darn near got to the national championship game. Washington did get there, and they got there with probably one of the most unknown coaches in college football. I think if you listed the most unknown coaches, he'd be in the bottom 10 or top 10, however you look at it. His name is Kalen DeBoer, and Kalen DeBoer grew up in South Dakota. He played football at Sioux Falls State. That is an NAIA school. And then he took over as the coach in 2005. He was great there. They went 67-3, won 3 national championships. Still, at that level, it's very difficult to move up because you play NAIA and you coach NAIA. It's a lot different than the big boys. And, you know, you don't often see guys make this jump, but he got some interest. He first coached at Southern Illinois, which is a lower-tier championship subdivision. He was the offensive coordinator there. 2 seasons at Eastern Michigan, 2 at Fresno State, 1 year at Indiana, which was quite a good move for him because that's where he got acquainted with Michael Penix Jr. And then he went to Fresno State as the head coach for 1 year. 1 year. He got hired at Washington in 2021, 2 years there, 24-2, AP Coach of the Year, and is 103-11 in 9 seasons as a head coach. So 9 years as a head coach, he's only lost 11 games. Now, you know, a lot of that was built up at NAIA, but still, to go to a program like Washington and put it on the map immediately and then get into the national championship game after 3 seasons on the job, pretty darn good. 2 seasons on the job, 2021 and then 2022, and then this year will be the 3rd year getting him in. He talked with Scott Van Pelt yesterday after the game and well, actually today, early this morning, about what they did and how his defense came up with the huge play at the end of the game.
Yeah, you know, they've had to do it quite a few times this year. Our offense does a lot, and I know they get a lot of attention, and as they should, but our defense has had to make timely plays and come through in big moments. And so super proud of them. You know, I think all the experiences we've had came through even tonight on that last drive. Just staying in the battle and continue to keep the faith.
You mentioned that on the field, and now one more time with me here, that you've been through these moments. You've been in close games. Is that what allows you, Kalen, to maintain the kind of demeanor, at least outwardly, where you seem incredibly calm in moments where I would be a puddle?
Yeah, I mean, it's intense, right? But, I think what to do, you just got to stay sharp and you got to stay focused on the main thing, and that's just continuing to just keep coaching. And I think my demeanor is important in carrying that on with our players and our staff. And so been through it a lot of times, and just, making sure that, we just focus on the next play. And the highs and the lows of the game, can't get up and caught up in the emotions of it. Just take care of what you can control. It's all good.
The story about your guys in February in the cold, and they came back for this, and all of that makes for a great, story and made-for-TV movie. But, real-life stuff has to happen, right, Kalen? Through summer, through the fall. It just doesn't happen because everybody wants it to, because it's hard as hell to win. What's the fabric of this group? What's the DNA of this group that shows itself time and time again?
Yeah, I think you just nailed it. And that's what we talked about after the game is a year ago. So many guys made sacrifices and just, really made commitments to each other. And, a lot of people do that, right? In life, in sports. And these guys, they just every single day brought their absolute best. And that was the challenge just over and over again that I and the staff just continue to put in front of them is, are you looking back on today and did you just get through it, or did you bring out the best in yourself and did you make our team better? And so, again, they've done that. I thought this last month, it can be long. And we did try to put a schedule together where they could stay fresh and stay sharp and we could build up to this day. But, credit to them, as the week went on this week, you could just feel like just a locked in focus, and the energy wasn't over the top. The emotions weren't over the top. The work was there, and it supported the goals that they had and set forth a year ago when, again, most of these guys made commitments and sacrifices, maybe not to move on to the NFL, stick around and try to finish the job.
There's a saying in this game, and you've made your rep as a play caller on offense, right? There's a saying, players, not plays. When you got a player like Michael Penix, how much easier does that make it to dial up a play?
Yeah, I think many times, even tonight, but over the course of Michael's 2 years here, you just always want to make sure that 9 has a chance to make a play for you. Get 9 the ball, and a lot of times, when drives stall, you kind of look back on it and you're like, man, okay, did we give 9 enough chance, to go out there and win that drive and get points on the board or win the football game? And so, he just does an amazing job of every play, just putting so much pressure on the defense. And, you have to keep it in attack mode, and I think that's the thing I love about what we do. We attack in a lot of different ways. It's our mindset, and I think that carries over to the defense too, and they come out there and attack and do their part every single week.
Just your first thought about what it will be like to share the field with them and what it will require next Monday.
Yeah, we understand. You get to the Final Four, and it's one thing. You get to a national championship. It's the best of the best. These guys have been through everything that we've been through. Their game today, going into overtime. They're resilient as well. And, I think from our own standpoint, just I can feel it in our team. We've adopted kind of one of the slogans is job's not done. And this was quite a few weeks ago. I just think that even in the locker room right now, the emotions are great. We're excited, but, it's not over the top. I think maybe earlier in the year, we had a game where that happened. Oregon at home, I think, was an emotional game. A lot of people just loving what we accomplished. I don't think we got caught up in ourselves, but a lot of emotion, and then the carryover, just trying to be our best the next week maybe didn't happen. I think ever since then, we've understood, hey, job's not done. Next game, moving forward, And, I think we've learned a lot about ourselves and how to handle these situations when we get these big wins.
I'll close with a final thought. Everyone has a journey in life, right, Kalen? And yours I find really, really interesting. And I appreciate that you're a leader of a team, and I appreciate that it's a program that takes the field representing Washington. But when you walk out on the field Monday, just for you, how much of Sioux Falls you bring with you and the journey that really started on a football field in South Dakota? How much of that you bring with you to Texas and a chance to win a national title?
Yeah, we all have our journeys. And, in particular mine, that's a piece. I mean, I think a lot of it's the experiences, and from a coaching standpoint, one of the things that I just love about a national championship game is this is your last game. That's the hard part about a playoff. And having experienced it so many years, you just don't know when you go into a game, if this is going to be it. And you don't think that way. You don't want to think that way. But that is reality. And the best thing about playing in a national championship game is this is the last one. And your guys that are seniors and guys that are moving on with their lives and careers, they're just going to sell out here these last 7 days to do something special together. Enjoy the moment, but let's take advantage of what the position is that we've put ourselves in.
It's Kalen DeBoer. He's the head coach at Washington. Just spectacular what they did. And they are underdogs heading into the national championship game next Monday against Michigan. But they've been a surprise this year, and they were expected to lose both their games to Oregon this year. And they managed to win them the regular season and then the Pac-12 championship game. Now, when we go to 12 next year, and all this carping by Florida State, that'll end because they would have gotten in with an undefeated season. But, be careful what you wish for with this. It's one thing in the NCAA basketball tournament when you have these teams like Fairleigh Dickinson that can knock off a top seed in Purdue. That can happen. UMBC over Virginia. We've seen that, and we've seen 2s beat 15s on a fairly regular basis, and those things happen. It's different in football. These guys are different sizes at the bigger programs. Yeah, occasionally you'll see upsets during the regular season, Appalachian State going into Michigan and winning there, those type of things. But you have to also sit through these games. They're long games. It's in college basketball, it's less than 2 hours. These are 4-hour games. And so Oregon, which missed out on the playoff because they lost those 2 close games to Washington, played Liberty. Liberty would be in the playoff next year. Liberty had an undefeated season, so they would have gotten in this year if it were 12 teams. Well, yesterday in the Fiesta Bowl, Liberty played Oregon. Liberty scored the first touchdown of the game, missed the extra point, and didn't score again. And Oregon beat them 45-6. 45-6. And those type of games are going to become common in the playoff. Even when we've had the 4 teams, we've had that. And this year, everybody looked at what happened last year when TCU was a complete embarrassment against Georgia and said we can't have that. And that's one of the reasons that an undefeated FSU team got left out. And if you want to look at Liberty and say, well, maybe they should have had a case to get in since they were undefeated. No. Not with 4. And with 12, you're going to have to put them in, and you're going to have to endure games like this. And Liberty losing 45-6, they didn't have opt-outs. This was their national championship game. So they played everybody, and they don't have the ability to stay with a team of that level. And this is what we're going to be facing next year. It's all going to be fair, so unfair to FSU that they got left out. Their starting quarterback got hurt. Well, we were saved last night by the committee. We were saved from probably a 45-6 win by Michigan over FSU if they'd have gotten in. That's what would have happened. And, thank God that Alabama beat Auburn and they got in and gave us an entertaining game. Texas, who knows what would have happened. They had 1 loss and how things would have shaken out. But they got in and they put up a great effort, and they lost to Washington. And, the committee obviously did a pretty good job of seeding because you got 1 playing 2 in the championship game. And that's what you want. And, Washington may be the team that closes out the perfect season. and wins the national championship, or could also be Michigan closing out a perfect season. You want undefeated versus undefeated for the title, don't you? And you don't want teams that are compromised like Florida State and teams that have these gaudy records like Liberty, but don't play enough teams to really be a competitive program in a playoff situation. So. Everybody's looked at the NCAA basketball tournament and said, look at that. That's a perfect event. They've been getting it done for basketball for all these years, and people said it would get watered down when it went to 64 teams. It didn't. Now it's 68. It's still great. It's still a great 3 weeks of sports. Well, if you translate that to football, it just doesn't work as well. And I thought Pat Forty made a really good point yesterday on Tony's show. He said, the way it is in college sports right now is the regular season for college basketball is mostly dreck. And then the NCAA tournament is great. And then for college football, until I guess last night raises it quite a bit, but going into last night where you've had lopsided games in playoffs and lopsided games in national championships, it's not as good. And, we've had to play them sometimes on New Year's Eve, which has drawn poor ratings. And, next year we're going to have these early games being played like on Thursday and Friday night. Paul Feinbaum said this on Tony's show as well. He said, you might have a team like Florida going into play at Wisconsin on a Thursday night in early or late December, and it'll be 30 degrees and raining, or 18 degrees and wind blowing. It's just not going to be as great. So we may be seeing one of the last great years of college football, and the fact that we've got what looks like a very good matchup for the national championship, not the SEC. And I've had SEC bias because so many Saturday afternoons are spent watching on gorgeous HD TV, the CBS broadcast. What we see this year is we see a team from a conference that's basically dead, the Pac-12, playing a team that's kind of second city, right? Haven't we thought of the SEC as number one and Big Ten clearly too? Well, Big Ten beat SEC last night. They're playing for the national championship. And the last gasp from the Pac-12 coming in with Washington and a quarterback who's a cast-off. When I saw Michael Penix play at Indiana, and I watched more than my share of Indiana games because my son went there, I thought he was pretty good, but he was hurt all the time, and the team wasn't very good. And now he goes to a team that could win the national championship next Monday night. Pretty cool stuff. In the meantime, Maryland getting ready to play Purdue tonight. I've already done my kvetching about the fact that it's on Peacock, and I'm not going to be able to watch it. Purdue came here last February as the number 3 team in the country, and Maryland beat them handily. They beat them by 14 points. And then Purdue goes into the NCAA tournament. I think they were the number 1 overall seed, and they lost to Fairleigh Dickinson. It's crazy. And they have a player who 20 years ago, heaven and earth would have been moved for him. He's not quick, and that's why we're not talking about him like Victor Wembanyama or anything like that. But Zach Edey is representative of what the NBA is today and really what college basketball is. In college basketball, a big guy can stay around and make some money, and probably he's going to wind up playing in Europe. He may wind up on a team as a role player, but his future is really going to be in college basketball this year. It's his last year of eligibility. He's born in Toronto. He's 7'4". And these numbers are staggering. He's averaging 22.3 points a game, 12.9 rebounds, 2.1 blocks, 1.5 assists, and he's shooting 60%. Those are numbers that people would pass out for. Oh, my God, look at that. But that's not currency in the NBA anymore, like the Wizards. Although they stink, they shot 53 threes the other night. 53 threes. That's what the game is. So last year's matchup, which Maryland won by 14, he had 18 points. He was 8 of 16, 8 rebounds. And this season, he's shooting even better. His percentage is up, and he's maybe going to win Player of the Year again. And he comes into College Park tonight with the number 1 team in the country. Yesterday, Kevin Willard, coach of Maryland, looking at this team where they are this year versus the one that they beat by 14 back in February.
The biggest difference that I've seen from last year to this year Obviously, I think the two guards have vastly improved. They are playing at a really, really high level, not only offensively but defensively. But I think the addition of Lance Jones is a monumental difference maker, because now they're bringing three guys off the bench that started last year off the bench. And so, I mean, it's amazing. They come in with two really, really good defenders. They bring Gillis off the bench, who's a great shooter, a relentless rebounder. I thought last year when they went to their bench, you could take advantage of them. I think their best lineup is actually when their three guys come off the bench with Edey. I just think they get better defensively. They shoot the basketball a little better. They've gone on some huge runs with their bench in the game where that just didn't happen last year. So they're not so reliant on Zach and Braden Smith of doing everything. Their bench guys are coming in and playing at an extremely high level. And I think if you look at who they've played and who they've beat, you can see that's why.
That's Willard on Purdue coming in tonight. Now, Maryland, they're going to throw Julian Reese at him. Reese gets in foul trouble. Reese, when he's on the floor offensively, he's a bit of a liability because he doesn't shoot free throws well. But he's the biggest guy they got to put out there. And whatever they were able to do last year to contain him and win the game, can they do it again tonight? This is Willard on what they expect to do and how they will handle the big man inside.
Yeah, pray. I mean, just look at his numbers. Like I said, it's his numbers are ridiculous. And again, the competition he's gone against, everyone's throwing double teams, triple teams. It's the big thing for us is just, we try to get early position. Hopefully we can get a dislodging call on him maybe once or twice to make sure, to hold our ground. I think he does a great job of really dislodging people and getting the position he wants. I think we're going to have to try to, get a call here or there and try to work early to not let him get such deep post position. Because once he gets it deep, he's developed both the right hand and left hand hook tremendously.
All right, so that's defending Edey tonight as Maryland takes on Purdue. The Terps' record doesn't look that bad. They're 9-4, but they lost 2 early season games that they should not have lost. They did lose a Big Ten game at Indiana, which isn't the worst thing. Indiana's got some talent, and the one Big Ten win that they have is against Penn State, which is probably the worst team in the league. So we really don't know much about them. The UCLA team that they beat a couple of weeks ago, it's not the UCLA team that came in here and blew their doors off last year. But the one hope that Maryland has is Jameer Young, who is in his final year of eligibility, another one of these COVID guys. He's playing his 5th year of college basketball, and he had a tremendous game at UCLA. He had 37 points. And then they came back to College Park on the red eye and he got sick, and he didn't participate in the game against Coppin State, which is no big deal. They had no trouble beating Coppin State without him. But since he's coming off illness and had a layoff that may have caused him to get a little bit out of shape, you wonder what kind of condition he's going to be in tonight. Because if they got any chance to win this game, if they got any chance to knock off number one, you got to have a big game out of Jameer Young. But if they do it, I think it's court storming, right? Don't you think that's in order? I would think so. How many times has Gary did it a number of times? He knocked off Duke when they were number one. He knocked off North Carolina when they were number one. I think he had 3 or 4 of those games when he was a coach at Maryland. So this would be a big feather in Kevin Willard's cap if he can get it done. But it's going to be tough because, as he said, this is a team that was ranked number 3 in the country last year. They're number 1 this year, and they're better. They're 3 guys who were starters last year coming off the bench, and that's another indication of what happens in college basketball now. That there must be so much money for them to stay, because otherwise, coach says you're coming off the bench, forget it. I'm going to another program. The transfer portal's wide open, so there must be money there, and they must think, okay, we're going to do what Virginia did when they got knocked off by UMBC, and the next year they won the national championship. And Purdue might be good enough to do that. Coming up in the next hour, Lauren Druhan will join me. We'll talk about college football. Got the national championship set up. Lou Holtz with some stories of his days at Notre Dame and the University of Arkansas. And it was 50 years ago today We were told to drive under 55. Stay with us. It's the Andy Poland Show, ESPN 630. Tony on a Tuesday. Yeah, Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock today. A lot to talk about. I'm sure he'll spend a lot of time on the 2 playoff games from last night, and we've been doing that for the past hour and doing some more now with Lauren Druhan, big college football fan, used to be a producer here, loves college football. And first of all, on behalf of the rest of America, I would like to thank the team that you root for, the Auburn Tigers, for saving us from Michigan blowing out Florida State by like 40 last night. Thank you so much for giving up that 4th and 31. Otherwise, we would have been subjected to that. So thank you for that, Lauren.
You're welcome. You know, if we can be good for anything this year, at least we can say we did that for everybody, you know?
Yeah. I mean, they are such an unpredictable team, almost winning a game against Alabama, which gave Michigan a great game last night. And then against Maryland on Saturday. I mean, how do you explain that? That was they didn't even show up for that.
I mean, it's honestly like just the story of Auburn all the time. Like, we are in games that we have no business being in, and then we just completely throw in the towel on games that we should definitely – I mean, I don't want to say dominate because I don't think I ever expected to dominate Maryland, but I figured we'd have the upper hand for sure. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't get to watch much of the game because I was so busy, and my husband – taped it for me, and I have yet to watch it because I'm like, I kept up with the box score, and I was like, you know what? Do I even really want to watch this? It's just going to make me mad.
Yeah, they made it interesting at the end, but it was pretty much dominated by Maryland, who was playing their backup quarterback. I don't think that Auburn had many opt-outs for that game. You know,
no, we didn't. Yeah, Peyton Thorne started. I mean, it was wild. It was really wild.
Yeah. So last night, speaking of wild, well, let's start with the one that's in your backyard, and it was a great game, and it came down to the end, and you want the ball in Jalen Milroe's hands, but I mean, how do you explain the call on 4th down there where it was basically like a tush push for this speedy team against Michigan? How do you explain that?
You don't. I mean, I don't know if Jalen Milroe got sped up in the moment or what, but there was there wasn't even a gap there. Like, I don't know why he's trying to run up the middle. I mean, I don't know. It was baffling to me. I'm really surprised that was the call because, there's no explanation. I was literally, my jaw was on the floor. That's not what I expected. I did expect this to kind of be a shootout. I didn't really think that Alabama would ever run away with it. But, yeah, the outcome is crazy. I'm just glad that both of these games were really good and they both came down to the wire because thank goodness it's been a minute since we've had semifinal games like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I, not to get too far off the track, but I was mentioning what happened to Liberty yesterday against Oregon. We're going to see that next year, Lauren. When they go to 12, they're going to be games like that. There's no way of getting around it.
Yeah, there will be, and you know. It kind of is what it is at this point. I'd rather see it in a 12-team playoff than a 4-team playoff because always 1 and 4 is always kind of like, okay, they got to play each other. Mm-hmm. But at least we're going to see it with 5 and 12 and 6 and 11. That's going to be where you're going to see it most. I feel like when we get to the 7 to 10 and the 8 and 9 matchups, it's going to be closer and it's going to be shootouts, and we're going to see less opt-out. So we're not going to have the Florida State Georgia situation. We're going to have less and less in that. So I think it's a double-edged sword when it comes to that. But yeah, I mean, we will, but it'll still be fun.
Is there a part of you as an Auburn fan that likes it when Alabama doesn't win, or do you have SEC pride? Did you want Alabama? I mean, we both picked Alabama to win. We also both picked Texas to win, which shows you how much I know. But did you have any rooting interest in seeing Alabama lose?
I did not. A lot of people in the fan base of Auburn and Alabama will. Like, my timeline when Alabama lost, like, the Alabama fans immediately took to, like, making fun of Auburn for losing in a ball. Like, that's just what the rivalry is. Right. Like, if they lose, they're going to immediately turn around and to us and be like, well, y'all aren't any good. And then, so there are fans out there like that. But I personally would love to see the conference do well. And as soon as Alabama lost, I was hanging out with Texas fans last night and watching the game with them. And I turned to the Texas fan and I go, well, this is going to be your initiation into the SEC. Make us look good.
And they did. I mean, it was a tremendous game, you know, and that's what you want coming down to the final play. We're talking to Lauren Druhan about college football and the two games from last night. And as I'm sure you were able to watch the whole thing, as we talked about, I envy your West Coast time. You know what I did? I went to bed at halftime because it was 11 o'clock already. And I'm thinking, oh, my God, it's going to be a close game and it's going to get dragged out. And sure enough, it didn't end until close to 1 in the morning. I got up, as many men my age do at a certain time of the night, and check my phone. And I go, oh wow, look at this! So I saw the last drive by Texas, and that was tremendous too. I mean, that they had a chance to get the game-winning score at the end, and the Washington defense, which has lost some guys, and doesn't get as much play as the offense with Michael Penix. That was a tremendous play that they made at the end of the game, didn't you think?
It was really, really a wild game. Honestly, watching the game, Washington dominated that game. The score doesn't really show that, but Texas had to fight and crawl their way through that whole game. And I was really surprised that it stayed as close as it did, because there were times there where that game could have gotten ugly very, very fast. Like, they were one play away from the game being completely over, and then they would do it. They would make the big stop. They would get the takeaway. It was a really, really fun game to watch, and it really does stink. I really wanted Texas to pull it through, but I mean, I remember watching Washington, and probably about the middle of the season. I didn't really watch a lot of their games, but I remember watching one and being like, holy cow, this team is the real deal. And I think they were a little underestimated, a little bit, I think, on a national stage coming into this game. And rewatching that game brought me back to the game where I was like, yeah, they're the real deal. I was like, yeah, I don't know why I ever underestimated them.
Well, I mean, I think both games where they beat Oregon, they were underdogs in both of them. And even though they had beaten Oregon during the regular season when they played in the Pac-12 championship, they were underdogs again. So nobody gave them any respect.
No one did. And so, I mean, I am happy for them because, Washington isn't really a big brand of football. Like, I'm really happy that they get to be in the national championship. It's a fun story for them. But yeah, I think all year they were just underestimated and doubted. And I mean, they're not doubted now for sure. So It'll be really interesting to see them in the national championship.
And I was talking about the coach, Kalen DeBoer, which if there ever was a South Dakota name, that's the name. He coached at his alma mater, which was an NAIA school, Sioux Falls State. And he had success there, but as you know, I mean, your husband played baseball at a school which is it Division I or Division II or whatever it is, right?
He played at a Division II.
Division II, okay.
South Alabama, yeah.
Yeah. So NAIA, and this is what I've been told, and he probably knows this better than I do, but I've been told that people who play at that level and even get a chance to coach at that level, it's very difficult to make the next step up. And the fact that he got enough attention to go to bigger places as an offensive coordinator and eventually become a head coach, I mean, that's a pretty remarkable story.
It is. I mean, it truly is. That is a really big step to make. And for him to come out and do what he's done with this team is truly, truly amazing. They were telling the story about how he brought in Michael Penix Jr. and he brought him in. Like, that was one of the first things he did from the transfer portal. And I was like, that's really great. And that's a promising future for Washington. Washington fans should be really excited about what they have to look forward to, because that means this guy can probably do really, really well on the recruiting trail and really take advantage of that transfer portal. So, and I'm excited for him. I'm not really a huge Washington fan, but they're on my radar now. And I don't know if you noticed, but they showed up for that game. I mean, for it to be in,
the fans, yeah.
in Louisiana,
yeah.
I was really surprised at how loud it got when Washington fans were cheering. I was like, oh my gosh, they kind of do travel.
Yeah, that is something because as you say, Texas has an enormous fan base, and I've made that drive from Austin to New Orleans. It's not bad. So, yeah, that was much more accessible to the people there. But, Texas too, it's been a while. They used to be a powerhouse, and I never could understand why they kept putting together these 6 and 5 years under guys like Charlie Strong. And, they finally went to the Nick Saban school of coaches, and you see what you get here. That really has elevated them. And I think, too, the facilities they have and the amount of money that these alums have and what you can bring in with the NIL, it's not hard now to build a championship team in a place like that.
Oh yeah, no. Texas is all the way back, and it's really exciting to see. I'm really excited for them to come to the SEC, especially with Oklahoma. I just think Greg Sankey knows what he's doing when it comes to putting together a good product. He really knows what he's doing, because we have a lot of amazing rivalries now coming to the SEC. And I kind of think Bama, to kind of go back to Bama, I think they're kind of on the downslope of their little dynasty run here. And it's crazy to be talking about that when they played in a semifinal game. But I really do think they're on the downward slope. So I'm really interested to see how the SEC evolves, especially with this new 12-team playoff coming next year.
All right, we're talking to Lauren Druhan. We've been terrible, obviously, at picking games. We thought we were going to have Texas playing Alabama for the national championship. Instead, we have Washington playing Michigan. And I was at the Michigan game at Maryland when Maryland at least made it close. I never really thought they had a chance to win, but they were competitive, and that was one of the games that Harbaugh missed. They've had a lot of close games, and they had another one last night, but they seem to find a way to win. They're, I think, 5-point favorites going into this. You watched both games last night. Who do you think wins the national title?
I think Washington wins it. I think after that game, their receivers were catching everything. It was like they had super glue on their gloves. Michael Penix Jr., I mean, Heisman, literally was so close to winning the Heisman. He is a Heisman-type quarterback. I think they win it. They have to.
Yeah, I think that, we keep underestimating Michigan's ability to guard against speed. And last night, this is not the typical Alabama team that has, 3 first-round receivers or anything like that. But they were able to do it, and they just seem to find a way. And as Jim Harbaugh said last night, they thrive on the adversity with, what's he doing there? Yeah. Why is he allowed to coach? Stealing signs. And the other thing about it is they're apparently not stealing signs now because everybody's aware of it. So yeah. they're able to win with more than cheating. And if they win the national title, I heard Paul Feinbaum earlier this morning, he said, when they nailed Harbaugh earlier this year, that if Michigan wins the national title, it's tainted. And now he's changed his mind. And I think most people have, based on what we've seen from the last couple of games.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of people, there will be people out there that will be, a little bit like, well, there's always an asterisk. But yeah. I think it's better that they're in this game than not. I think it would have been more of an asterisk if they weren't allowed to play in the college football playoff. As much as I don't agree with what he did, I don't really think it deserved him to be shunned from the playoff. So I'm glad we have it. There will still always be people out there that are like, well, he did this all season, and there's an asterisk there. But I'm really excited for this game. I think it's going to be a really, really good national championship. But yeah, I have Washington winning it.
Okay, I'll go the other way just for the heck of it. So one of us is going to be right. We talk next week. And I also like the fact that it's supposed to kick off at 7:30. At least that's what they say. So maybe I'll even be able to stay up and watch the whole thing. So anyway, have a great week, and we'll catch up next week after the national championship game.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks. That's Lauren Druhan from Los Angeles, not from the shadows of Pasadena, California, where, they've had to stick to this whole Rose Bowl thing. Like the Rose Bowl is going to be in the playoff circumstance, but in order to host a playoff game, it had to fall on New Year's Day. and it had to be in that 5 o'clock window. The Orange Bowl, that was played on late Saturday afternoon, was a complete embarrassment for FSU. But the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all, we're not moving for you. You come to us. And so it worked out that they did, and it worked out that it was a really great game, and it worked out that Alabama got in instead of Florida State, and it was very entertaining to watch. So I enjoyed all that.